Thanks be to God. You may be seated. We are in our series on Jacob, and we are in the University of Hard Knocks. The Bible Knowledge Commentary said this about this passage. It says, the rivalry that appears here explains much of the tribal rivalry that followed. But Genesis is clear. God chose the despised mother Leah and exalted her to be the first mother. The kingly tribe of Judah and the priestly tribe of Levi trace back to her, in spite of Jacob's love for Rachel and her son, Joseph. If we remember our story, Jacob has learned a huge lesson. That, number one, his uncle is a schmoozer. And he has taught Jacob a huge lesson in that by, in essence, getting rid of both his daughters. I didn't mean that. It means Jacob got two wives is what has happened. But he's about to learn another lesson. And the teachers are going to be his wives. Let's pray. Father, I just ask for you to speak to us as we venture into the story. There is so much here that we look at, we hear, but sometimes we don't apply. May you take this word and apply it to our lives as we study this passage and the story of Jacob. Amen. Now we're about to enter March Madness for basketball. If you're a basketball fan, conference tournament starts this week. I mean, it's a huge, huge deal. Indiana used to be a huge deal with basketball, if I remember right, back when it was all teams played for the same prize, and then they split it up into classes, and it's lost a little luster. But in Kentucky, there is a huge rivalry between two colleges, the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky. And every year they play a game, and it is a huge game in the state. And I heard the story that in one of the games between these two schools, there was an elderly woman who was sitting alone with an empty seat next to her. Someone approached her and said, "Ma'am, I have rarely seen an empty seat in Rupp Arena, let alone at a game between these two teams. Whose seat is this?" Well, the woman looked up and responded that she and her late husband had been season ticket holders for 28 years, and that the seat had belonged to him. Aww. Well, couldn't you find a friend or a relative to come to the game with you? The observer asked. "Are you kidding?" she replied. "They're all at my husband's funeral." I think she carried the rivalry just a little too far at this point. I think maybe she should have gone to the funeral. I don't know, maybe not. I've never been a part of that kind of a rivalry to where I would miss a funeral for it. But Jacob is about to enter into that kind of rivalry, but it just happens to be his two wives that are in the rivalry. And he really does set up his own problems here. You see, most of our problems we set up ourselves and we get into. If we look at the passage in 29, we're going to jump back to chapter 29 very quickly. It says in verse 30, "So Jacob went in to Rachel also, and he indeed loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for 7 more years." So Jacob, we know, loves Rachel. Not so much Leah. It's like, okay, I got her, so what? Pretty much, he could care less about Leah. And Leah's feeling just a little hurt, which you would think. I mean, she thinks she's married a man, and he'll start to love me and care for me and start to nurture me, and not so much. So Leah's feeling very, very left out. That nobody notices her. Nobody sees her. Except for one. And God notices her. If we look at 31 to 35 to 29, Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. Well, nice thought, but no, didn't happen. She conceived and bore another son, named him Simeon. She conceived and bore another son, and named him Levi. She had 3 sons, and then she conceived and bore another son named Judah. God opens her womb. She starts popping out children left and right. She has no problems having children. She has 4 men, as they would have put it. She has 4 boy children. I mean, what a blessing to her. In that part of the world, for a woman in the Middle East to have a child is a blessing, but to have a male child is an incredible blessing. It's above and beyond everything else. And she has 4 of them. And you would think that Jacob would take a little more interest in her than he does. He obviously takes some interest in her, or they wouldn't have 4 boys. But we also see that she stops bearing children. You see, God notices when we're going through a struggle. Leah's feeling left out. She's hurt. She's wounded. She thought that maybe Jacob would love her, and Jacob could care less still, even after having 4 boys. Not so much. But how often do we feel this way? We feel like God doesn't notice us. God doesn't care. God doesn't even pay any attention. He's just sitting up on a cloud in heaven, dangling his legs, going, oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, didn't see that coming. That's how we respond at times when we get in trials and struggles and problems. When we feel left out, when we feel people don't care for us. Leah felt this way. But we know, because of verse 31, that God notices. God sees her. God sees Leah. Not only does she have 1 son, but she has 4. And Rachel has none. Think there was any conversation? Oh, look, I've had my 4th son. How many have you had, Rachel? Nudge, nudge. Drive the knife in a little deeper. God blesses Leah. She is abandoned to her own devices. She's just there to produce children, I guess, according to Jacob. If you look at the passage, it just appears that way. But God not only blesses her with 4 male children, he also blesses her in another way. The Pentateuch says this: 2 of the most important Old Testament institutions have their origins in an unwanted marriage. From Judah came the institution of kingship, and from Levi, the priesthood. The priestly line comes from Leah. The national line of Judah comes from Leah. Anybody know who else came from the line of Judah? And no guess? Jesus? David? They come through this line. They follow through the line of Judah. Judah is one of the few tribes that still exists today. They talk about the land of Judah. They talk about this. This is something that happened. The priestly line, the line of Levi, still exists today. They know exactly who will be the next high priest when the next temple is built. They know who it's going to be. He's in the priestly line. This all goes back to Leah, not Rachel. Now, Rachel has some important part in this when she has Joseph. Just a little bit. He just rescues the whole nation from death and the famine. But other than that, what else have you done for me? You see, Rachel really gets nothing out of this. How often do we feel like Leah? No, seriously, how often do we feel like God has abandoned us? God has refused to listen to us. God just simply doesn't care. Leah felt this way. Rachel even feels this way because she can't have any children. And for a woman in the Middle East to not have children was not a good thing. You were frowned upon in society. Unfortunately, instead of trusting God, they chose to take it out on Jacob. No, seriously, they're gonna, well, we'll get to it. And Jacob goes along with it. Good old Jacob. you think Jacob's kind of naive at times? Or he just doesn't, I don't know if he's just naive or just doesn't care, or it's just an amazing thing in this story that he lets all this happen. But it all goes back to the thought that God does not abandon us in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of everything. You see, what happens with us is we get caught in this and we feel God's kind of forgotten us. We take out our frustrations on those closest to us usually. Ever done that? I've done that. I have to vouch for that. I've done that. Instead of trusting God and believing that God will, we get angry, we get frustrated, we take it out on everybody around us. We take out our frustration and anger. We attempt to manipulate others to rectify the situation. If I could just manipulate this, remember Jacob trying to manipulate God? Well, we try to do the same thing, and this is a case of that. Things have gone sideways, and well, this time the girls are going to try to manipulate things. You see, Rachel knows that Jacob loves her, and he doesn't love Leah. She also knows that because of that love, she can manipulate him into doing things that he wouldn't normally do. Well, let's look at the story. Chapter 30, verses 1 through 8. You see, Rachel gets mad. I like this. Verse 1. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I'm going to die." Seriously, really? Really? Is that just a bit of an overreaction to this? First place, excuse me, Rachel, have you looked at your sister had 4 kids by Jacob? I don't think this is Jacob's issue. If we look at what's going to happen, we realize it really has nothing to do with Jacob. And it has everything to do with Rachel. She's the one that has no children. She's not able to have children. It's not Jacob's fault. Jacob's doing fine in that aspect of life. She knows Jacob loves her more than her sister, so she uses that against him to manipulate him. And surprise, she's right, and he does. Now, he gets mad at her. He gets angry, but he still does what she wants. You see, it says where Leah suddenly, after the 4th male child, becomes barren. Some commentators have speculated what happened is when Rachel cried, Jacob stopped sleeping with Leah. Well, that'd create barrenness real quick. So that's a speculation. And I can see that in this story. I can really see that Rachel manipulates him enough that he goes, "Oh, okay, I'll just sleep with you from now until eternity. Or whenever I die or whatever." You know, he's saying that sort of thing. It's kind of like the story I heard from Susan Balducci. A good Italian name, right? Good. And she said, "My mother, a master of guilt trips, showed me a photo of herself waiting by a phone that never rings. She said, 'Mom, I call all the time,' I said. 'If you had an answering machine, you'd know.' So, soon after, my brother installed one for her, and when I called the next time, I got the machine. If you're a salesperson, please press 1. If you're a friend, press 2. If you're my daughter, who never calls, press 911 because the shock will probably give me a heart attack." I think Mom is trying to manipulate the situation here a little. She's trying to play on her daughter's emotions. But from what I've seen, manipulation really of others never pays off in the long run. In fact, it usually backfires. Manipulation with me just makes me angry. And if I notice somebody's trying to manipulate me, what I will do is I will probably do the exact opposite of what they want me to do. Because it makes me mad to be manipulated. And I pick up on those things pretty quick. But manipulation just never seems to pay off in the long run. In a book called The American Lion, Andrew Jackson in the White House, John Meacham wrote this quote. And it's interesting because Andrew Jackson was the 7th president, and he had a wife named Rachel. which is very ironic for this story. And they had no children. They didn't have children for whatever reason, they don't know. And they had a conversation that went something like this. "Oh, husband, how I wished I had a child." With Grace, Jackson said, "Darling, God knows what to give, what to withhold. Let's not murmur against him." What great advice. What wonderful. It's too bad he and Jacob didn't live in the same era. He could have given him this advice because Jacob says nothing like that, really. He says kind of. He goes, Jacob's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God? Who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" And then he sees it hurts her, and he apologizes, probably, knowing Jacob. But it's the same idea. Why do we try to interfere with God when things don't go the way we want them to go? Jacob could have used this advice with Rachel. But it appears he jumps into the chaos with both feet. He doesn't even hesitate to take the manipulation of Rachel and go, "Oh, okay, sounds good to me." Look what Rachel does. And Rachel said, gotta go back up. She said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her that she may bear on my knees, and through her I too may have children." When it says bear on my knees means that child would be hers. It would, almost as in an exchange of property, when that child is born, it's placed on her knees and she is mom. Bilhah is kind of out of the picture when it comes to being the parent. You see, manipulators, let me say this. If you're a manipulator, how do you react to your spouse? Again, I'll give you a few things to unpack this Rachel thing. And Leah too, because she's going to get into the act. Don't worry. She's going to have her moment. But here's how you notice you're a manipulator. If you react to your spouse or your children or your fellow workers to get them to do things your way. If you react in anger, if you react in tears, if you say things to try to get people to do things your way. Not all the time, but sometimes you may be a manipulator. But is the one being manipulated them or you? That's really the question here. Look what Rachel does. We just unpacked that a little bit. Verse 3. And she said, "Here is my maid, Bilhah." So we've got the two handmaids coming, Bilhah and Zilpah, coming into play in this passage. Verse 9 says, "And when Leah saw that she stopped bearing, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as wife." And Jacob's going, "Yes!" He just goes right along with this. Folks, did you notice that? There's nowhere here where Jacob goes, "Oh no, I'm married to you too, that's enough." No. You never see that. You see that Jacob just goes, "Yeah, all right, sounds good to me." So Zilpah and Bilhah get into this. I was going to put this as the Handmaid's Tale, but since that's a TV series, I thought I'd leave that out and just say this is the two handmaids. Does anyone else find this passage interesting? This just fascinates me. That this is the beginning of the nation of Israel, folks. This is the beginning of the nation. This is the 12 tribes of Israel being conceived here. You know what's really fascinating? Is nowhere do we know where Bilhah and Zilpah came from. I'm thinking they were Gentiles. Oh, wait a minute. Gentiles? Ooh. And part of the 12 tribes, the Jewish nation comes from Gentile nations. Oh. I wouldn't bring that up to a Jew because you'd probably get into a pretty vicious argument at that point. But all appearances here are part of the line of Israel comes through the handmaids. We know that. And that they were probably not from the line of Abraham. We don't know that for sure, but sure does appear that way. So about this point, you might be saying, You mean out of all this chaos, God brings forth a nation? Yep, that's it. That's exactly what's going to happen. God works amidst the chaos of life to bring about His will for His glory. You see, we find ourselves in a conflict, turmoil is the best way to put it. We are in the midst of chaos as a church. But if God is working in this mess, why would He not be working in our mess? And that's not just for what's happening here at St. Andrews. That's life in general, folks. Life is just chaotic. It's crazy. Just when you think you've got it figured out, it goes sideways again, right? It never seems to stop. And that's what Jesus told us would happen. But He also said He would be with us. God would be with us. He would guide and control. By the time we get through verse 24 of chapter 30, all the tribes of Israel have been born. Every one of them. We've got all 12 tribes. We're done, right? They're a happy family, and it's going to be... Now, we know the story of this family. They're chaotic all the way through. It goes to the thought I like to talk about. God is in control of this. It looks chaotic from the outside, but the nation of Israel is being born. God is getting them created. They're coming through these tribes. Rachel's child, Joseph, will save the nation, but Leah's children become a vital part. It's interesting, the children born to Bilhah and Zilpah have no real major role within the nation of Israel. The tribe of Dan is the first one born of Bilhah. You want to know what the tribe of Dan is known for? Being the weakest of all tribes. It comes from Bilhah, the handmaid. It doesn't come through Leah or Rachel. Most of the tribes, in fact, I can say all the tribes born to Bilhah and Zilpah are part of the lost tribes of Israel. And yes, there are tribes that do not exist today. The tribe of Judah? Oh yeah, those people can trace their line. I'm from the line of David. They can always trace back, and that is the line of Judah. So we know that line follows. Judah becomes one of the two nations. Remember, Israel splits. Solomon's son taxes them. The people from, Israel say, nope, we're out of here. 10 of the 12 tribes take off. 2 tribes stay in the south. They're in Jerusalem. They've got Judah. That's their tribes. But that is the nation of Judah. This is very, very interesting history. And if I keep going, I'm not going to stop. So I'm going to stop here because I'm going to really get into this whole thing. But the whole idea is this whole passage, this whole story, the story of Jacob, is God is in control. God is orchestrating. God is moving. He is in the midst of all the chaos of the story. And this story doesn't get better. It only continues to roll out. Dennis Prager, who is a Jewish writer, he's written kind of a commentary on the book of Genesis. He says this. It has been said that when it comes to self-justification, everyone is a genius. You can laugh because that's pretty good. For Leah to accuse Rachel of taking Jacob from her, when precisely the opposite was the case, was an extraordinary act of self-justification. It also manifests another common human trait. Portraying oneself as the victim when one is, in fact, the victimizer. And these two girls have this down, folks. You're so mean to me. You don't treat me right. You don't give me children, even though it's my fault. You don't love me because I'm the lesser of the sisters. They're playing the victim card. They're trying to manipulate Jacob. They're trying to get him to take them, to prioritize them. Max Lucado said this, through the squabbling, strutting, struggling, competing, and comparing, the love potions, surrogate strategies, and tears of the loveless and the childless, God was in control. He delivered on his word then. He still delivers on his word still. God has not stopped being in control. We looked at Proverbs 3:5 last week, and I intentionally took off verses 6 and 7 and kind of held it for this week because I think we need to hear this whole thing. Trust in the Lord completely and do not rely on your own opinions. With all your heart, rely on him to guide you, and he will lead you in every decision you make. Become intimate with him in whatever you do, and he will lead you wherever you go. Don't think for a moment that you know it all. For wisdom comes when you adore him with undivided devotion and avoid everything that's wrong. I like that. Don't think for a moment that you know it all. Us pastors have a little problem with that at times. We're pretty large in a church and we know everything. But does that describe you? No, that was well thought. You see, we think we can manipulate God. We think we can manipulate others. We think we can control God's will. Rachel and Leah think they're in control here, folks. Did you catch that? They think they've got it all under control. Their family's going to be so chaotic. I mean, they try to kill the youngest brother. He ends up saving them all, but different story, different time. If you find yourself trying to manipulate people, let me give you just a little almost fatherly advice. I know, fatherly, yeah, that's relative. Stop it! Trust God. Trust God to control the situation. Trust God to take over. Trust him. If he is God, then he is God. If he's not, then okay. No holds barred. Let's just do whatever. Let's be like the rest of the world. I don't think that's working too well out there. Have you noticed? None of it seems to be going very well for them. Maybe it's time our world got back to trusting God. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for this story. It shows that our heroes of the faith were just as human as we are. And we can learn lessons from them before we get caught in situations. We can look at the story and see your hand moving through this whole story, guiding and directing, creating the nation of Israel. You were not manipulated or controlled or surprised by anything, because you are God and you are holy. May we learn to trust and obey you more. Amen.